The federal government is implementing the basic registry and information system to house the database of citizens, residents, and their economic activities in each ward, which is ultimately linked to a central system at the federal level to achieve an integrated system. Now, the idea is to have an integrated system that can be deployed for national planning. My guest on this week's episode of the program talks about how the system can be used to ensure good governance. Hello there, welcome to Dateline Abuja. I'm Ibrahim Adra. Barua is a community on the outskirts of the nation's capital, and it is begging for attention. Residents are lamenting the absence of basic amenities including potable water, electricity, medical facilities, schools, and access roads. The FCT in Focus segment gives you more details. The interview segment, we are discussing the basic registry and information system in Nigeria. But first, here are the stories that made the headline within the week in the nation's capital.
President Muhammadu Buhari left the country for Saudi Arabia, where he has been attending a high-level summit on trade and investment. At the end of the summit, he will be in London on a private visit. He is expected to return to Nigeria on Sunday, November 17, 2019. The Nigeria Governors Forum says the payment of the consequential adjustment in the new minimum wage will be determined by each state. After a meeting of the forum, the chairman, Governor Fayemi Kayode of Ekiti State, says governors are ready to comply with the 30,000 naira minimum wage as agreed by the tripartite negotiation committee, but they cannot be forced to comply with the consequential adjustments.
For us, we've always been clear, this was a national minimum wage increase, not a general minimum wage increase, general minimum wage review. So, to that extent, we don't want the media to confuse issues. It's about a national minimum wage increase. And yes, that may necessitate consequential increments. We have no doubt about that. But that's a matter for the state to discuss with their workers. The best that the forum can do is stick to what has been agreed with states. States were part of the tripartite negotiations. States agreed to 30,000 naira minimum wage. But states also know that there will be consequential adjustments, but that will be determined by what happens on a state-by-state basis, because there are different number of workers at state level, there are different issues at state level. Every state has its own trade union, joint negotiating committee, and they will undertake these discussions with their state governments.
Federal lawmakers adjourned their plenary session again to give more time for the ministries, departments, and agencies to conclude their budget defense sessions. The lawmakers had earlier adjourned for 2 weeks for the budget defense sessions. Since the process is yet to be concluded, an extension of 1 week was announced. The lawmakers will now resume on Tuesday, the 5th of November 2019. State governors are crying out over monthly bailout loan repayment. This is in spite of central bank's extension of repayment period to 30 years. This was revealed at the end of the meeting of the National Economic Council.
The new repayment period is 30 years. And this means that a state will be paying monthly 162 million. But again, today, the states still were not satisfied with the condition. So we're expecting that the Federal Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the central bank, and the states will engage again with a view of having the central bank still further revise the conditions to reduce the monthly repayment burden.
Fear of voters' harassment and inducement is topping the lists of concerns raised by the Independent National Electoral Commission ahead of the November 16th governorship election in Kogi and Bayelsa states. Chairman of the Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, stated this at a meeting with civil society organizations.
The Commission is similarly concerned about possible voter harassment, inducement, including vote buying, and other sundry violations of the Electoral Act. I must re-emphasize that voters are not allowed to carry their mobile phones or any photographic devices into the voting cubicles on election day. Given the volatile nature of politics and elections in Bayelsa and Kogi states, the Commission decided to engage with stakeholders early and continuously. Our objective is to speak early and continuously with all stakeholders and hear from them what the additional steps we need to take in order to ensure peaceful campaigns, election day activities, collation of results, and declaration of same would be. We have already engaged with the security agencies to ensure unimpeded access to voting locations and collection centers for accredited media organizations, in addition to adequate protection for all, including election officials and voters.
The Supreme Court has dismissed an appeal filed by the main opposition candidate Alhaji Atiku Abubakar and his party, the People's Democratic Party, challenging the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari in the February 23, 2019 presidential election. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Tanko Mohammed, led 6 other justices of the Apex Court to deliver the verdict. He added that the reasons for the decision of the court would be made known on a date to be announced later. The Supreme Court had earlier struck out an appeal filed by the Hope Democratic Party and its presidential candidate, Mr. Ambrose Owuru, challenging the declaration of President Muhammadu Buhari as winner of the February 23 presidential election. The federal government has lifted a suspension of the operations of 2 aid groups, Mercy Corps and Action Against Hunger, in the Northeast. The announcement was made by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Hajia Sadiya Farouk. The NGOs were suspended based on the allegation that they were supplying food, fuel and medicine to Boko Haram insurgents. The Federal Executive Council has approved a special risk insurance cover worth over 500 million naira to insure the assets at the College of Aviation, Zaria, Kaduna State. The sum of over 2 billion naira is also approved for the road and perimeter fencing of the Port Harcourt Airport.
To cover from 10th of June 2019 to 2022, but yearly payments will be made in accordance with the extant laws and regulations. The carrier that we intend to bring is such carrier that will support the national economy, 450 billion US dollars official GDP, 200 million people, at the center of Africa itself, equidistant, very robust enough to compete favorably with international airlines. And we are not saying that when you establish an airline, it means that every other airline in the country goes down. No. The purpose and intent of government is to continue to support businesses so that they will continue to provide service and employ our people.
The Nigerian Army says the planned Operation Positive Identification is not to scare innocent Nigerians, but a hunt for suspects who may have run away from the northeast to other parts of the country. The Army says guidelines on the operation are yet to be released and there would be no visible military presence or roadblocks.
We have information that they are spreading out away from their traditional strongholds. So based on that, this idea of Operation Positive Identification came up so that when we undertake operations, that's cordon and search operations, we, based on intelligence, go to certain areas and we cordon it and we arrest people, and from there we identify them, and from there we'll be making a lot of arrests.
The Minister of Information and Culture says in addition to an implementation committee set up to regulate the broadcast stations, modalities for injecting what he calls sanity into the social media space are being worked on. According to the minister, the social media is being hijacked by extremists proliferating hate speech, and while the Nigerian government has no plans to stop free speech, hate speech and extremism cannot become free speech.
We are going to inject sanity into the social media space, which some extremists have turned into a platform for disseminating fake news and hate speech, which, like I said, are dangerous tools in the hands of extremists.